Okay, testing. Okay, just testing. So, hello everybody, and if you just joined us, welcome to round 12 of the Assist Tier 1 version of the IIRL Racing League. And as you will see, judging by the screens at the moment, we are in Russia, the Sochi Autodrome. Clear driver's favourite there, yes, but as it's the Formula 1 game, I'm sure real life track doesn't necessarily apply, so it could be a particularly fun race for all we know. So, and then again, it was pretty fun what happened this year in Formula 1, which it was a bit cruel robbing Lando Norris of his first Grand Prix victory, but we could be in for another fun one here at the Sochi Autodrome. So if you've just joined the stream, welcome. Obviously, thank you so much for joining us, and just make sure obviously to let me know who you are in the chat. It would be great to have as many you guys around to integrate as many of you guys as I can. Lando, how you doing? Thank you so much for joining. How are you? How's your week been and all that malarkey? Hyper as well, how are you, mate? I see you, great to see you. Let's see who else is available, who else is joining the chat. So I've got 6 of you watching now. Another note, we are now at 97 followers on our Twitch channel for IRL, so hopefully we can do that a little bit more just so we can get it up to the magic 3-digit number of 100. So if you know anyone who likes a bit of Formula 1 League racing, do let them, do plug the channel for us. It'll be nice to get to that little number 100. So thank you guys so much obviously for that, for those of you who do follow. And let's see what this current round brings us, as the Bullet is on his outlap in the Aston Martin, and Aston didn't necessarily have the best race going around, particularly in the Assist Tier 2 one, but I had to miss out because they needed a stream, so I ended up giving up my race slot and ended up commentating this one. So Hyper, I'm really good, thank you, mate. How are you? Still very much still quite tired for this one, because it's been a long week for me, still getting used to everything in the flat, but hopefully everything, it should be calming down somewhat, so we'll be back up to speed now. It's nice to have a bit of a break as well from real life Formula 1, because we just had a triple header obviously in the Qatar Grand Prix with things things have been generally crazy, particularly with their Mercedes have picked up their pace in real life. And just now, I think they've just had round 9 of the Esports Championship, so I haven't been able to see any of that. So do let us know what you thought of the more recent races in the chat as well. Lando, I'm very good, thank you, mate. I am really good. Thank you so much, obviously, for following us in the stream, and wherever you are, I hope you're having a good time watching this particular round. So we are going to follow Bullet as the first driver out to complete a timed lap. We're just going to go on board, alternate between both the broadcast and the T-cams as well, just to see what kind of angles we can get. He goes into third for the first corner, which means he's quite conservative on entry. And now you can afford to cut the curb a little bit during that long left-hander, which, let's be honest, is the best corner in this track, where there not are very many good corners, because as you will see, just like that, while they got a little bit of understeer, 90-degree right-hander. Oh wait, look there, there's another right 90-degree right-hander coming up. Oh, and this one, it's not quite 90 degrees, but it's one of those corners that just simply kills momentum. And I think that's a definite criticism of the Sochi track, which has led to the actual move to Agora Drive in, I think it was 2023, that move is going to happen there. So, oh, and he actually tops the wall there, Bullet, so it doesn't look like it to be the best sort of, not the smoothest run necessarily for him. Drops down to second to get into the corner. Yeah, as Mr. Wiggles in the AlphaTauri stays out of the way. Al3 Ket, thank you so much for following. We are at 98 now, guys. We are at 98. Let's make sure we can get to that magic number 100 by the end of this stream. I would absolutely love that. And the guys here, the streaming team, would love it as well. As Bullet sets the original benchmark. And here we have Platty and the Haas follow him up. Let's see what kind of time he puts on the board. And he goes fastest there with a 1:31.3. Jake Sharrock comes across the line to do a 1:32.1, and Millsy is on his outlap in the McLaren, so I'm going to see who else is coming round. And PSRY Jamin has invalidated his time. Iros J, it's a 32.2, so not the best lap to start off with, as we see Hyper coming around the final corner. What kind of time does he do? It's a 32.6. So definitely room for him to improve there, I feel. And APS Greg now goes across the line with a 31.1. And I think Price the Bees goes fourth with a 32.2. Who else is coming around to complete that lap? I think it may be TRT Lucifer. And just like that, the Alpines, who have very much been the pace setters in qualifying, one of them takes the timesheet so far with a 31 flat. As we see now, commence in the Ferrari is, I think, is substituting for Ripley and TD. He does a 33.3, which, like I said, it's definitely not going to be safe enough to get into Q2. I see yellows all around everywhere, as all the drivers seem to be slowing down just to make sure that everybody can sort of get round. And now we have the Aston Martin rather coming into the pits. Platty, I think, will be following him as well. I think that's Jake Sharrock behind, also into the pits. Millsy has invalidated his time, so maybe he's just backed off there to find that little bit of extra time. Let's go on board with PSR Jamin in the Alfa Romeo. It's been a while since we've seen PSR Jamin, so thank you, obviously congratulations, and it's great to have him on board with us. I'm sure there's a comment in there that makes sense. He goes third with a 31.4. APS Greg comes into the pits. John B is on his outlap. And Millsy, I believe, is going to go for another timed run, which he is. And here we now, Aki is also out in the Mercedes. I see everyone from P10 down hasn't yet set a time. So we're going to follow the Mercedes on board, which is... It's had a few tricky races, but I'm confident he'll have... You have to have... You know what they say? you don't get the rainbow unless you have the rain, and I think with plenty of rain, let's just say the rainbow is definitely coming, but the entry into that corner wasn't exactly the smoothest. He drops down to 4th for the long left-hander, which means he can get the car stopped at least. Got the differential between time trial and the multiplayer lobbies really are different. He goes wide, he'll lose time, but it won't invalidate his lap. So there we have the Mercedes rear wing not flexing anymore as it sort of did in real life. And he just gets the car started. He's a little bit sheepish as he goes through the left-hander, but he's still on track to squeeze in a very, very good time. The car almost looks quite slippery, it seems, as it comes round the right-hander down to 3rd for the final corner as he comes across the line. And unlike the Mercedes of last year with Lewis Hamilton, he keeps his time. As John B slows down, as he knows he goes wide to at least get a lap time in. So that's a 1:31.2 for the Alpine driver. Millsy is up in P5. And AMS Fairley yet to set a time in his McLaren. It's the next car to come around and put up a time at the board. Now, what is he going to do here? Running the number 46. He goes 4th with a 1:31.415. This TMA is already I think he already knows that he's invalidated his time, so it's just trying to get some heat into the tyres. As who is out, it's not yet set a time. So we've got Sean Gregory, Run Amok, Wiggles, and TMA, who all yet to run a time. Who is out on a time lap? Well, Jake Sharrock must have been out on his out lap, and he ends up spinning the car. So, oh, and he's reset onto the track. I'm not sure whether you're allowed to do that, but he should be back out on a timed lap. But again, I'm not entirely sure whether you're actually tired. It's been another hard week for me. It's a long day staring at a screen on my current day job, so it's quite a bit of a struggle for me at times, but I'm still here and I'm still surviving. I'm still having a great time commentating on here. As the two Alpines are on a bit of a shootout between themselves, it looks like, for pole position. With Hyper now is not on his Hyper as well as on his out lap, it seems. So I hope your next qualifying lap goes well. I'm just going to stick with the Alpine of TRT Lucifer, who is currently the pace setter. Looks like a beautiful line to take there. It takes just enough curb without going off onto the white line and ruining his lap. As he comes round to the end of the second sector and to the I think it's actually the second DRS zone that you encounter, and Jake Sharrock has retired, so I think it looks like he may have crashed out on that particular run. And it's showing a few cars on my timing screen, so it's gone a little bit well. It looks like John B may have had a spin in his Alpine, but TRT Lucifer could be on for a time 1, but gets massive amounts of understeer from that left-hander. It's such a weird off-camber corner that just completely throws you off, and Lucifer knows, I think, straight away that he hasn't quite got the time which he needs to, and with John B, his time is invalidated well, so not quite the shootout we were expecting. So what can the McLaren of AMS Fairley do? He's taken a very tight line through there, saving as much time as he can. He's about a 10th up on his best, as Aki AMG stays out of the way in his Mercedes. Dropping down to 3rd when he needs to, just so you can get enough rotation. He improves up to P3 with a 1:31.3. TMA is still on an outlap. There you go, and they're seeing quite a sharp exit out of that corner, so that will help him with the run all the way down to turn 1 with DRS open. And the AlphaTauri of Wiggles actually coming into the pits. TMA's got to set a time, so we'll roll on board with the Ferrari then for now. As you see there, taking as much curb as he can get away with on that long left-hander. Archie upshifts off to 8th. Gives him another gear change to think about, but I don't think that will do too much against his time. A little bit of oversteer into that right-hander, which does compromise the midsection of his corner. Stays in 5th for that long left-hander, but that's quite a sharp corner back in. Upshifts early to 4th, now gets the DRS activated. On all the way down to sector 3, there was a very awkward left right, then right left. It's a very, very awkward sector this, but how does he take it on entry? Slows that down just well enough, and now he's up to 4th, to 5th. It goes very gentle on the throttle, which is exactly what you need to do, unless your car will be spinning. And that's a very tight exit. I mean, no understeer there at all from that Ferrari. This could be a pretty good lap, but it's about 6 tenths now. Between 1st and 6th, it's about 4 tenths now. Where is the Ferrari going to end up? He ends in 3rd. Actually, ends in 5th, rather, with a 1 minute 31.381. Who else is out on the time? It's Fairley is also coming into the pits. PSR Jamin is on an invalidated lap, so we'll just go to Iros J, who's a 10th down on his best. So a lot more time to find in that Alfa Romeo, but that was a nice little entry into that left-hander there, which catches so many people out, but it doesn't look like he's going to improve, so he's coming into the pits. As does Hyper behind him. As you saw before, PSR Jamin is on an invalidated lap, so we're not going to go on board with him. Aki is on an out lap. We're just going to see if I can find somebody who is on a timed lap. So we're going to go on board with a second Ferrari of Commence, running the number 61. Oh, and he's backed out of his lap. It doesn't seem like he's going to get much of an improvement at all. The AlphaTauri of Wiggles is next in his car. Now he's someone who's really got to set a time. Sean Gregory, I think maybe they were leaving it to the very last minute to do his time. We'll just see when the yellow flag is up how much time we've actually got, and that's that time validated. John B has retired from the session with TRT Lucifer on his outlap. Millsy is now retired from the session. There's only 3 cars that will only be going out in this session because there's only 18 runners, and every other car from 15th place downward will be eliminated from the first qualifying session. So we have just short of 3 minutes to go, and Mr. Wiggles takes a very clean line through there, taking as much curb as he can. I have to say, I mean, this third corner is a nice one to look at in Sochi, apart from the rest of the track, which is, by comparison, garbage. I can imagine when the fans reacted, it was moving from Sochi to Agora Drive, they thought anything's better than Sochi, but as much as I love to rib on about this track, we got a session here, so let's just make sure that we enjoy it while we can. As Mr. Wiggles opens his DRS and comes down to the start of the 3rd sector of the Sochi track. It's a 1 minute 4.7, so this looks quite promising. But the rear steps out a little bit. It's kind of squirreling a little bit as he comes through the left-hander. Let's see how he handles this one. A little bit greedy with the curb there, but I think that shouldn't cost him too much time. TMA has retired from the session in his Ferrari. And what does Wiggles do when he comes across the line? It's only 9th for now, which is 31.9, so looks like he lost plenty of time in that 2nd sector. Aki is also on he's also on a flying lap as well, but I think TRT Lucifer is also on a run in his Alpine. He's on an invalidated time, so we're going to go back to the Mercedes. so just alternate a little bit between each of the cameras. It's a yellow for as you'll see, a lot of the drivers now starting to retire, so they clearly feel comfortable with the lap times that they're doing. Just less than a minute to go now in the session. Now it looks like, as Commence, Run Amok and Sean Gregory are still in the pits, that's it for them. So all the other drivers now can actually come in. Eventually they can finish their lap times effectively with no consequence, but it's always good to find that extra little bit of lap, just that extra little bit of time, because that could help you out in the second qualifying session for sure. As you'll see, more and more people are retiring. Iros J is now retired from the session, and what can Aki do to improve on his time? Well, it doesn't matter what he does because his time's been invalidated. So Wiggles now returns into the pits. So that effectively decides the order then for qualifying from about 16th down. So we have Commence out in the Ferrari, we have Run Amok also out in the Williams, and Sean Gregory is out as well in the Aston Martin, who didn't even come out of the pits to set a time. And that's it. That'll be the end of the qualifying session. I mean, with no real consequence there from Aki, Bullet, Plassey and Lucifer. They just need to make their way back to the pits. So the Alpines, as you will expect, are the pace setters for now. Possibly another 1-2 maybe on the cards. But then again, there weren't the tidiest of laps for either of them, so there's clearly more pace to come. Dylan63, how are you? Good evening to yourself, and thank you very much for joining the stream. How are you finding the qualifying so far? And do stick around for the race as well. And it's a happy days. Thank you so much for thank you so much for coming on board. Very well then, so I'll just run you guys through the main order for this first for the first part. So going out, we have had Jake Sharrock has obviously crashed out, so he will be starting in 15th. Commence is out in 16th, Run Amok is 17th, and Sean Gregory is out in 18th. So that takes up the order for the first qualifying. Things very, very close so far between the top 10. We're not separated by just under a second. I know that's becoming the norm already within this tier, but still hyper competitive nonetheless. It doesn't take anything away from that at all. There you go. So we've got Pajestic with us. How are you doing? Great to have you on board once again. So it looks like the first one out is it's one of the McLarens. I can't tell which one, whether it's Fairley or... Yes, it is Fairley. So Fairley is the first one to come out on the soft compound tyres. Very well, thank you, Padge. Just a little bit of a tiring week for me, work-wise, but yeah, good things are happening obviously on my end, and it's good to be streaming once again for IIRL. It looks like it's going to be yet another fun race. I say that optimistically as we're in Sochi, but for now. As for the weather, I actually don't know because I didn't get around to actually looking at it. The Red Bull number 2 driver, that's kind of a poison chalice, their badge. I suppose with hyperspace, he's anything but a Red Bull number 2 driver, so. And Helmut Marko isn't exactly looking at him through his wonky eye either. So, Fairley will be the first car we'll be following during the session, as he's the first one to come out. And no, he's actually coming to the pits. So, scratch that. It will be TMA, who is out on the medium compound tyre, which should give him a bit of race strategy. But he's now into the pits as well. What does the McLaren of Millsy do? He's going to stay out. So we're going to go on board with him. Running the number 15, who I don't think anyone in Formula 1 has actually run the number 15 so far. And I can make it. Well, I'm happy to commentate, Padge. It's always fun being in this league, and we've also got, like I said, hopefully should be racing with no issues on Sunday, and it's nice to have a bit of a break from the Formula 1. So, like I said, great to have you on board with us, mate. As Millsy comes up to the end of the first sector, what time is it going to be? It's a 33.4. So notwithstanding, it looks should be relatively quick. Still some nice line. That's a nice line he's taken around that. I don't know, but it takes a little bit much of the sausage curb coming into the entry into the left. Now he drops down to third, and again a little bit too much of that sausage curb there. The back end actually steps out on him. As for a sector time, we're looking for 1 minute. This is so far it's 1 minute 5.4. So it's probably going to looking at about probably a 1 minute 32 here for someone on the medium tyre, which I'm not sure actually whether it's going to be the first one to get through. So let's see how Millsy does to finish off his lap. He comes round the final corner now, and what does he do for a lap time benchmark? It is a 1 minute 32.3. So given the lap times that we saw in Q1, that's not, I don't think it's going to be safe for that one. Someone tamper with John B's rear wing. I mean, it's not like he's running score marks or anything from Mercedes. You might want to put your Christian Horner hat on or something. As Mr. Wiggles is actually up on Millsy's time by about 3/10 in his AlphaTauri. Honda engine, I always thought that sounded quite good on this game, this Honda engine. As he comes round the final corner. It's a 32 flat. So again, not the biggest benchmarker in the world, but he's gone faster than Ross as well, who has done a 32.3. APS Greg must have had a lap time invalidated to do that full lap. And Price the Bees, what kind of time does he do? And he goes second by just about a quarter of a tenth there. The Ferrari of TMA is going to be starting his run. Fairley is also out on medium tyres. Millsy should just be coming into the pits. Who is out on his time lap? It must be Aki. Runs wide there, so that invalidates his time just before the line. There's never a more painful time to do that by then. The two Alpines are obviously on their outlaps with APS Greg. I think he's a little bit down on his time, and yeah, he's backed out of this one, so he's just making sure to stay out of the AlphaTauri's way of Mr. Wiggles. And in now we also have PSR Jammin, who's out on his time. RSJ has also completed his, and Jammin has slowed down, so it looks like he's clearly backed off. as Mr. Wiggles goes to the top of the timesheets with a 31.6. So that's a convincing second lap on the medium tyres. Hyper, as well as on his out lap, has just come out to do his flying lap, and that's crucial. The Alpine of, I believe, maybe TRT Lucifer looks like he's going to be catching a pretty good tow. There's only one Horner, praise the Lord, unless you count Cherry. Well, I think Karen Horner is what the internet's calling him now, because he's just missing the haircut, if I'm honest. The amount of complaints going on between Red Bull and the FIA have been a little bit petty, I have to say. But still, it still comes along in a very interesting season on and off screen in Formula 1. Hands down one of the best seasons I think we've had in a very, very long time. And Hyper comes round the long right-hander into the second DRS zone. What lap time can we expect? What sector time can we expect as John B goes fastest with the 1 minute 31.6. So with all things considered, that looks to have been a very, very good time from Mr. Wiggles. He drops to second there to make sure that he can slow the car down. Let's see how he does. You could just see with the back end stepping out there, the amount of understeer. It looks like the front end had some grip, but the rear end was just giving up on him there. As Hyper comes round the final corner now, and what type of lap time can we expect there? And oh, it looks like Price the Bays has retired from the session as TRT Lucifer goes fastest now with a 1 minute 31.3. Amos Fairley has abandoned his lap behind. PSR Jamin has had his lap time invalidated, so he's going to be going for yet another try. TMA is coming into the pits. I think we're going to go on board with the Alfa Romeo here, because his back's kind of up against the wall, and every lap he does on this medium tyre just takes more and more life out of, well, it compromises his strategy coming into the race. Swiggle saying the race is going to be a dry one, so this qualifying session is more important than ever if you get through in the top 10. What does Jamin do for a first sector time? And scratch that, John B is just the first one to dip into the 1 minute 30s. He has a 30.8. What can PSR Jamin do to match? Imagine this way, it may be a kind of almost an anniversary for me, because the Russian Grand Prix in 81 was where I made my first commentary debut actually with the Sun God. Bloody aliens out there indeed. But PSR Jam is putting a very competitive second sector. The right front locks up a little bit, but it's a 1 minute 4.6 so far for a second sector. So what does he do coming here? And that's a nice entry into that corner. Doesn't take too much of the sausage curb. Now hopefully that time should get you through as well, Mr. Wiggle, so I wouldn't say death to you just yet. As Jamin comes across, and he's invalidated his time. Right on the last second, PSR Jamin invalidates his time by going way too wide on that sector. So that is, well, that's a massive problem for him now. That is a massive problem. See, more of us are joining the stream, so there's 14 of you guys on there, so thank you all for joining. And if anyone is new, then do hit that follow button for the IIRL Twitch channel. We are on 98 followers. Another 2 more will get us into, actually, you know, as I say that, Clem7374 is followed, so thank you very much. We are now at 99 followers now. We are so close to getting to 100. So let's hope we can end this stream on 100 plus followers. Hyper. So as we see Hyper coming out now onto the softs, we have Greg starting a lap on the medium tyres, and Jamin also has his next time validated, but he's not going to be taking any life out of those tyres, and this is really going to ruin his strategy as the Alpine tries to stay out of the way, but yeah, that looks almost like a miscommunication there between the two drivers. But Jamin obviously has found his feet and stays. Right, so I highly suspect he'll be going again. No, he won't. So he has got to get back out pronto, but ideally on the soft tyres, or else his chance of getting a lap in are over. So the clock is up against it. I see that John B is retired from the session. And Greg, he's had a slow one. He's had a slow one indeed. So I imagine he'll be backing off for this one to go at it again. It's definitely not going to improve on his time. So I think we'll just go on board with Platty, who's down in P13 at the moment. So this isn't good for the Haas driver. Only 4 cars will be leaving this particular session because we have the crash of the AlphaTauri of Jake Sharrock, and Platty has invalidated his time. He's going to have to go for it again. And he is going for it again. So we're seeing a lot of lap times being invalidated. It's only going to be a very, very tense ending coming into the end of this session. Hyper is also on a timed lap. Platty is on a timed lap. PSR Jamin, I think, is coming out now, but he has got to get a move on. It's probably to add a bit of front wing or whatever, but he is on the medium tyres. AMS Fairley has retired from the session, but he's still in the pits in the McLaren, so there was no there's no crash or anything there. Lucifer's retired from the session, but I highly suspect he's safe with his time. And TMA has invalidated his time yet again, so he's going to have to go around. We're seeing a lot of times getting invalidated in this session. Greg is now retired from the session, so he will not be taking any further part. But Jamin and Bullet and Platty are all under pressure. Bullet has left it a very, very long time to go out in his Aston Martin, but now is the time in which he has absolutely got to nail it. Hyper is 3/10 up on his best, but only 3/10, so this should be good, I think, for about 6th position, as long as he can find enough time in this final sector. It looks to be a very sensible entry into the left and then into the right. Doesn't overshoot the exit. Now he's got to be careful with this. Careful with this final sector. It's so easy to invalidate your time. Does he come across the line? Yes, he does. What does he do? It's a 31.6, and that puts him into P5. So that should see him safe. And the Ferrari of TMA 24 is out of the qualifying session. Platty is coming to the pits, so that will be it for him. He will not be taking any further part. All to play for then for the Bullet, PSR Jamin, and Millsy as well, who's also on another time lap. So much happening now. We're going to go on board, I think, with Millsy. He's the first one to come across to start a lap who's more or less under threat. Still keeps on the wheels. That's the thing you've really got to keep an eye for, particularly in the session. We're seeing a lot of times being invalidated, so he's got to keep everything on board. Keep everything on the black stuff. I don't cross over the white stuff. That's a 1:04.8, so that should be okay so far to get him through. It's definitely up on his time. Platty in, that's not the best. Platty in, that'll be P13 at best for him. Bullet is coming through the second sector. Millsy is coming through to finish his time, but I highly suspect he's going to make himself safe with this one. Oh, and he's chosen not to do it. That is very risky indeed. That is very, very risky for Millsy. So what is he planning to do there? And Jamin gets through. And what does Bullet do? It's a 1 minute 32.2 to get through. Can the Aston Martin get through and dislodge the McLaren? Is it enough? Yes, it is. It's through, and Millsy, for one reason or another, chose not to improve on his time, chose to slow down there, and is now out of this qualifying session. That is an astonishing finish. So there we have it, folks. We have Millsy, TMA, Greg, and Platty, who are all out. So there you will see on the timing screens, you have Millsy is out on the McLaren, TMA is out in the Ferrari, Greg is out at 13th, and that's Platty also out in the Haas. So we have both Ferraris out, we have one McLaren out, one Haas. I'm trying to think who's also out. We also have, I think there was another Red Bull of who's not even on there, so there we have it there. But those who crashed out obviously aren't going to be going through, as it's kind of expected. The two Alpines are the ones you expect to fight for pole position. But interesting, PSR Y Jamin has got about 4 or 5 laps wear on his medium tyre, so that's it essentially compromises him effectively to a essentially and almost like a soft strategy, because he's got so much wear on them. But I could be wrong. There could be all sorts going on there. But for some reason, it doesn't look like we seem to be getting going in the lobby. It seems to have frozen for some reason. And there we have it. We have it's the end of this session. The start of Q3 will be starting in 15 seconds. So here we're now on to Q3. So a bit of a shock exit from Millsy in the McLaren, who may have decided to brave it, but doesn't look like it was the wisest thing to do. They say fortune favours the brave. Unfortunately, fortune did not go his way. Sounds like a bit of a tongue twister there. So now the fight for pole position is on. The two Alpines obviously are the clear pace setters, as seen as going 1-2 in the first 2 qualifying sessions, and now we have PSRY Jamin, who got through by literally the skin of his teeth, having come in to, I think it was effectively put on a fresh set of, no, there wasn't a fresh set of tyres, but it was maybe to put on some new, put on some more front wing, or maybe that was it. But yeah, it's a strange one, because with that sort of decision there, it doesn't particularly help. And it seems like we've had a spinner, which I think was Price the Bees in the Williams. Love to see a bit of banter going on in the chat, as looks like the Alfa Romeo will be the first one to set a lap time. IIRL, his teammate, is also behind in 8th place. I think the man formerly known as Mr. Drift Ninja is coming round the final. Is coming round this the final sector now to obviously begin his lap. So we've almost got the 2 Alphas and the 2 Alpines almost out first before everybody else, and we have the Bullet once again doing the Aston tactic of saving it until the end. So it looks like he's probably expecting plenty of safety cars and wants every fresh set of softs that he can get a hold of. It's going down to IIRL. Seeing as a fairly okay start to his lap. You see his teammate actually gets out of the way, so I don't think he's had the cleanest starts. Certainly not. But here we have his teammate of IIRL making inroads on his times. In front, we obviously got one of the Alpines. I imagine it's TRT Lucifer, who's gone wide, so he will not. He will have his lap time invalidated, so he won't be setting anything competitive this first time round. As John B comes round from behind. Quite a nice line that IIRL is taking. He comes down to the left-hander, then into the right. I think the way he set up that corner was a very, very nice exit. So gives him as much traction as possible coming out of that right-hander. But what does IIRL do across the line? It's a 1 minute 31.7, so not quite the fastest time out there. But looking behind, let's see what time John B can muster in the Alpine. It's a 30.7, so that is a very dominant time indeed. Fairley's lap time doesn't look too competitive, so we'll go to Mr. Wiggles. Coming round the final corner, it's a 31.8. Oh, and seems like I'm wrong about the so-called Aston Martin tactic, because the Bullet is out on his time lap. Aki AMG goes P4. And IIRL Hyper comes around the final corner. He goes P4 with a 32 flat. So we obviously got TRT Lucifer needs to set another time for sure. Price the Bees is unvalidated time, and AMS Fairley needs to get one on the board himself. So we're going to go on board with the McLaren here and see what this car can muster. Price to be stays out of the way. It's a 14.7, so that's a fairly decent time so far. So you can suspect the time it will be certainly into the 1 minute 31s. We're probably looking at a 1 minute 31, a mid 1 minute 31, which will be good enough so far for second place, because there's quite a bit of a gap between IIRL and FRA John B. As we see Fairley come across the line, what does he do to finish off his run? It's a 31.1, so that's definitely much more impressive than I thought. There was definitely a strong third sector there for the McLaren. Aki AMG comes into the pits, and we have the Bullet also coming into the pits. TRT Lucifer is on his outlap, so as he'll be the only car out for quite a bit, so we're going to go on board with him and see what the session orders for him. It was caught out, especially because on this track it is so easy, it looks like, to invalidate your lap time, because there's quite a lot of runoff and the curbs are quite inviting, so as soon as the curb becomes inviting, that you're going to get quite greedy with it. So yeah, John is whatever happened, John is certainly on fire as he has been mostly during the Alpines. He's I remember he came back to win the Dutch Grand Prix with what was a sterling comeback drive, same as there's another brilliant drive as well at the Hungarian Grand Prix. You just see whatever you can throw at him, he'll just take it on the chin, and life gives you lemons, he'll make plenty of lemonade with it. So there's 33-1 for a first sector for TRT Lucifer. Seems very, very straightforward there in that Alpine, as takes that corner in 4th, drops down to 5th for the long left-hander, and that's just the right amount he can get away with. Must take it a little bit easier this time, but upshifts early to 4th, so that's a very strong sector there for TRT Lucifer. What can he do for a 3rd sector time? It's a 1 minute 4.3, so that's among the fastest that we've seen. How does that stack up against John B? Because I remember Fairley's time at that point, I think, was a 1 minute 4.6 or 0.7, and he went on to do a 31.1. So as long as this is a comparatively good final sector, maybe this could be a front row at least for TRT Lucifer as he comes down to the final sector, as the Alpine comes across the line. And what is he going to do with the time? He goes fastest by 0.3 actually, with a 1 minute 30.4 from his teammate John B. Now, we could be looking at an Alpine front row for sure. As Bullet is on his outlap, PSR Jammin is also on his outlap, as is Mr. Wiggles and Hyper. I think Jammin was the first one to come across to set his time, so we are going to go on board with the Alfa Romeo, who is very much up against it. He hasn't quite gone his way so far with all these sorts of like invalidations, with all these track invalidations, and now we have the time of 1 minute, the time of 44.9. It's definitely not where he needs to be. We all know he can go faster, and he's invalidated his time. Definitely not what he needs. So instead, we're going to go on board with IIRL Hyper, who's currently in 6th position in the Red Bull, but those times are certainly due to come down. TRT Lucifer comes back into the pits. That let the Percival Lucifer. I couldn't agree more. I mean, unless John B can find a chunk more time in the bank, then looks like pole position may go into his teammate. But he is on his outlap now, starting to warm up. Hopefully all the other drivers will stay out of his way as Bullet gets out of his way, but he's yet to set a time, so he's very much up against it himself. As Hyper, a nice little exit there. Unfortunately, the 82 race didn't quite go well for him so far in Italy. Well, he subbed for the Ferrari in 81 as well in Monza. Didn't quite go okay there as well. As Hyper is up by 0.2 on his time. That'll be good so far for 4th place, but you get the sense that everybody around is going to improve, apart from Mr. Wiggles, who comes into the pits. And at this time in the session, that is going to be it for Mr. Wiggles. So 5th is the best he could possibly achieve. And Hyper goes 4th with that time. Iros J is 0.2 up on his time. As the Bullet also retires from the session, so he's not going to go any higher than 9th. Iros J goes back into 4th. TRT Lucifer has retired from the session, as John B is nearly a 10th up in his sector 1 time. I think this is the one we want to see, because this one is this is for pole position. Takes that right-hander in 5th gear, so that's a very impressive way of doing it. The Mercedes stays out of the way, but oh, I don't know whether you put him up there, and that's invalidated his time. That's very controversial circumstances, as John B's time has been invalidated. I don't know whether he's been put off by the Mercedes there, but yeah, that is a very seismic deciding factor in this race, rather, because that could pretty much guarantee pole position for TRT Lucifer, unless he can save his tyres and go out one last time. as PSR Jamin goes P3 with a 30.7. Looks like John B will get around just in time, but controversial circumstances for his lap there. Let's see what the Alpine can do. I think he'll be the last one to come across the line as Hyper comes into pits and trying to see if anyone else is on a timed run. Price the Bees is actually out. He's going to be starting in 10th because he's invalidated his time. This is the lap that really counts now. It's John B versus TRT Lucifer. Lap time invalidated. Lucifer retired off track. So clearly rattled by that. He's got to make up the time. He's 7/10 up in his first sector. Let's stay on board with him for see how he handles this next sector. A little less life in his tyres, but that's a lovely line to go at 5th gear and the right line there. And that's just about as wide as he wants to get away with. So that's a pretty decent sector so far for John B. But whatever happens, it will be crucial. It will be controversial circumstances here as he snatches a toe off that McLaren, of the Mercedes rather. He's 2/10 up now. This could go absolutely down to the wire between the two Alpines, with John B finding a lot of time in that second sector. If he just needs to find just over about few hundreds in it, and he should have the pole position covered. He comes across the final corner now, and what does he do? He just takes pole position by 0.03 of a second. John B fights back from having his lap time invalidated to coming back and taking pole position for the Russian Grand Prix. It is an all-Alpine front row. Even with Lucifer retiring on track, it's an all-Alpine front row. I think as well, with Hyper achieving 6th position as well, I have to say well done to him. I think he is an 82 regular, so to qualify 6th for 81, very strong results, so well done. So there we have it, guys. We have the top 10 for this session. We have John B and Lucifer locking out the front row for Alpine. Jamin is 3rd in the Alfa Romeo. Fairley is 4th in the McLaren. IRSJ is 5th in the Alfa Romeo. 6th is Hyper in the Red Bull. 7th, Wiggles. Impressive performance in the Alfa Tauri. 8th is Zaki AMG in the Mercedes. And then Bullet and Price the Bees. No time set between them, so they are 9th and 10th respectively. So, as this qualifying session ends, we are going to go to a 5-minute break. So I suppose while we're waiting for the race to get started, to get underway, I suppose I better ask a question to everybody. 2 races to go now, with Hamilton getting a little bit more momentum for everybody. How do you guys feel the way this championship is going to go? And bear in mind for this race, sorry, but blame the Coke Zero. As soon as I say that, it is literally go time for this race. With 20 seconds to go, it was a very dominant qualifying performance indeed from the 2 Alpines. So I wonder where they're going to. This will be another kind of domination for the Alpine drivers. Let's see what this race has to unfold for us. It's quite a nice angle there. So I'm just going to get everything here set up. Tyres, telemetry off, lap data off there. As the formation lap is now underway for this Russian Grand Prix. Now for those on the harder tyres, on the medium tyres rather, it's a little bit harder actually just to keep them a little bit warmer. I know the softs are a little bit easier to warm up, but those on the medium tyres, apart from maybe Jamin, who's done about 5 or 6 laps on those tyres, are going to have quite an advantage when it comes to strategy. So I imagine there'll be 1 or 2 safety cars at least in this Grand Prix, as Aki and the Bullet are disqualified, have now been allocated back to the grid. So there we have 16 runners now going out to warm up their tyres. Solando, you reckon Fairley's going to win? It's quite an interesting bet. I mean, anything can happen. I mean, it may be the Russian Grand Prix, but anything can happen. I mean, who knows? I mean, Mazepin could be world champion one day. Okay, maybe it's not. Maybe I've kind of overstretched it with that bomb. But anyway, for now, as we see, the drivers at the back are just coming up to the back of the long straight, which is where John B is at the moment in his Alpine. His teammate Lucifer behind, he was done by about 3/10 of a second. Behind him is PSR Jamin, who's got a lot more wear and tear on his tyres. AMS Fairley behind him in 4th position. Iros J and Hyper are 5th and 6th on softs. Wiggles has done impressively well to get into Q3 with mediums, and Price the Bees is also on mediums as well. I didn't quite see what happened between the two of the Aston and the Mercedes to get the contact in the way there. But now, as we all see them come to form up the grid for this Russian Grand Prix. Now, as the Aston Martin lines up to take the final grid slot, we are going to go on board to the front. It will not be long now until we see the top lights come on right now. And there we go, with 3 lights, 4 lights, 5 lights. And the Russian Grand Prix is underway, and it's a monster start as well from the 2 Alpines. And it looks like his teammate Lucifer has got a massive toe on his teammate coming down to the first corner now. How is this going to play now? And just like that, it looks like Lucifer has taken the lead. Yes, 2RT Lucifer has taken the lead in the first of the 2 Alpines, and yellow flags at the back, so it looks like the Bullet has crashed out, unfortunately seems, and the virtual safety car has been deployed as a result. Crucial start there, it seems, for the for TRT Lucifer, the second Alpine, who both Alpine drivers got off the line very, very well. As Mr. Wiggles looks to have made up a position in 6th, Price the Bees up into 8th, and Aki AMG, I don't know whether he's got damage in that Mercedes, so I don't know whether it may have been contact maybe with him, but it's not a good start for the Bullet, who unfortunately is out of the race. And just like that, within the first few seconds, the first virtual safety car for that matter has been deployed. It's going to help Jamin, who has done plenty of laps on those hard tyres. But then again, it's also going to help everybody else because they've got one less lap to do at racing speeds, and with that, it's a much less wear and tear that you put the tyres through. Millsy is up into 9th, Platty is 10th, Jake Sharrock is up in 11th, Sean Gregory, having started from the back, is now up into 13th position. That fastest lap was going to be broken so quickly as we see the leaders get away at the front. It's a lovely run down to this first corner. Behind, it looks like nobody seems to be making a move as of yet. Millsy versus Platty looks to be the closest battle as of yet. The McLaren leaves him room, and there you can see there the Haas goes up the inside on that long left-hander, but does the McLaren hold it? No, he doesn't, and that is a lovely move from Platty in the Haas, who sweeps all the way around the outside to take 9th position from Millsy in the McLaren. Those soft tyres working very well for him as well. Sean Gregory behind in 12th position is 1.7 seconds now back from the rest of the field. Now the top 11 separately, and oh, and look at that there, what has happened to IIRL Hyper? Hyper has lost his front wing, so I'm not quite sure what the issue was there. He has lost his front wing and will drop all the way to the back. The Ferrari of TM as well, I imagine, was to come into the pits to change tyres, but that is not what that Red Bull needed at all. I don't know, was there contact from the other car? If not, then we'll just see if he submits a clip to the stewards in that one. So back up to the leaders who are coming round to the second part of the lap. We have TMA has retired on track, which I think has caused another virtual safety car. So there we have it, the pace slows down yet again, so that will be some consolation for Hyper, who for whatever reason has lost his front wing. He'll drop all the way to the back, but he'll get a new nose, and as it's a virtual safety car, he won't lose as much time, but he won't be able to close up to the back of the field. Jeff for Cake 457, will I last line? I'm presuming you're either TMA or the Bullet. So now the pack is halted yet again, and the virtual safety car is ended now. We are back underway, and Fairley looks like he's under pressure from Iros J in the Alfa Romeo, the man formerly known as Mr. Drift Ninja. And this is crucial. PSR Jamin has got DRS on FRA John B, but he's got the slipstream and overtake from his teammate to pull away. The DRS train is quite powerful on that back straight, so it doesn't look like, as long as there is a complete train, you won't see many overtakes happening there. But Hyper, all the way at the back now, is coming through just almost midway through the second sector to start his next one. As it stables out roughly at the front, who's going to have DRS. I think the closest gap is probably between Fairley and Jamin. And crucially, no one's obviously activated the DRS yet. And there you go, it's just been activated in that second sector now. So you can see the two Alpines fighting with each other now. John B, anxious, after losing the lead to his teammate, is now fighting him for first position as Jamin fends off the McLaren, who fends off the Alfa Romeo, who fends off the Alfa Tauri. And what is happening here? Oh, and there's very argy-bargy between the McLaren of Millsy and Jake Sharrock and the Alfa Tauri. But the Alfa Tauri looks to have gotten through. Very close. I think they did very well on there just not to run into each other as Hyper pulls into the pits, what I presume will be to retire his car, which would be a massive shame for him. Oh, and he's lost his front wing again. He's lost his front wing. Crazy stuff. Could there be an overtake coming here? It's 2/10 coming down into that sector, but he just resists him. TRT Lucifer, it is scrapping up now between the two Alpine drivers at the front. This inter-team battle, and it is getting so much closer behind as well. About 4 seconds covers the top 6. That is it's a very, very close, almost similar to Formula Esports racing. Now, John B, Fairley, IIRL J, all setting fastest laps now. And this could be the place where John B does it, where he overtakes his teammate, who goes now to cover the inside of the first corner. Can John B get the move done just in time? No! Oh, yes, rather. He does it. He stretches it out. He's got the inside on the left-hander, and he hangs his teammate out to dry. John B, after sticking out the top, takes the lead. But that is very, very close fighting between the two Alpines, who I don't suspect a move will be going on in here with the dirty air coming off the cars. It may be hard for TRT Lucifer to follow, but he's staying with his teammate for the time being, as behind you'll see the McLaren of Fairley right behind the Alfa Romeo. And with about 3/10 of a gap now between John B and Lucifer, you can feel another overtake is coming, and you can say TRT Lucifer will surely have the move done even before they get to the corner. But his teammate covers the inside. It is civil war at the moment at Alpine for sure. And they've got to be careful here, because anything that they do, they are going to be... well, they're going to fall into the clutches of everyone else behind them, who are pretty much line astern at the moment. So, and a Hyper hasn't retired his car. He's come out for yet another run, and he's on the medium tyres, and he's in for yet another front wing. So it's yet another bite at the cherry for the Alpines. And John B gets a brilliant exit out that final corner. I think he pulls just clear enough, I think, to defend from the DRS, and I don't think Lucifer's going to fight it too much here. No, he's not. As the train continues between the top 6. I almost don't want to take my eyes off of this battle, but this is so much obviously to digest. As Platty holds on to 7th position from Jake Sharrock. Millsy is in 9th, and Price the Bays is in 10th. IIRL Hyper has a 3-second time penalty for multiple warnings. There's a yellow flag in that sector, and he has spun yet again. This is certainly not Hyper's day at all. Just a massive shame for him. He looks like he may very well go a lap down on the Russian Grand Prix. So this could be quite crucial for the Alpines, because if they stop the infighting between each other, they can at least use DRS from each other to protect each other from the cars behind. But let's go on board with MS Fairley, who is 2/10 behind Jamin, but doesn't look like he's going to go for a move. No, he's not. Maybe it's the first corner that really makes the difference there. It's that first corner all the way down that long run into the turn 1, as that's more than likely the best place for an overtake, and it starts to space out a little bit between the top 6. 6/10 now separate Lucifer from John B, but with Hyper retired from the session now, it looks like he may have pulled into the pits to retire his car, which was certainly a clean thing to do. But look at Wiggles on the back of IIRL J. I mean, they're all closing up to each other now, and doesn't look like there's going to be a change of position for the lead up the front, but the top 6 are pulling away from the rest of the field. Platty defends from Jake Sharrock. As we go now to what's from about 10th position down, they're placed for that final point. We have Sean Gregory fighting Bees, fighting APS Greg, Commence, Run Amok, and unfortunately Aki is 11 seconds down from here, going into 5th place. And what has happened? There's a yellow flag for some reason, so I don't know who's obviously left off the time. And PSR Jamin has a 3-second time penalty for cutting the corners, so that's not going to serve him well at all. With 5/10 back between Lucifer and John B, Lucifer's obviously going to close up. I don't think he's going to attempt to move or anything too risky on his teammate. As we look at Fairley now, goes round to what will be the inside Oh, and the front wings nearly touched there. So almost a little bit of contact there, but he gets a switchback now coming into the left-hander. Is he going to make the move stick? It's not often you see overtaking there, and he's pulled it off. Lovely bit of driving from AMS Fairley, who is now up into 3rd position. As we go back on board with the leaders. It's 5 tenths now, and let's see what he hasn't got overtake on at the moment, so I think he'll be saving his battery more than likely for an attack as it closes up between the top 4 and 5, and jamming. Maybe his tyres are starting to go off. Maybe those super worn mediums are coming back to bite him. And Jake Sharrock, he is spun at the end of the first corner, so he has lost what was 7th position. He now drops to P13, which means he's got to do well to look after his tyres, which would have overheated like crazy. And this corner is one that you put a lot of G-forces through them, and Run Amok has actually come into the pit. So whether that's a scheduled stop or not, I do not know. But he has come into the pits to change tyres, so those hards theoretically should see him through to the end, as it's still very much status quo between the two Alpines. Wiggles is 3 tenths behind IIRL J, and Millsy now has passed Platty. So maybe it's Platty's tyres maybe starting to go off now, but the Haas is fighting him. But unlike AMS Fairley, he can't quite make the move stick coming out of that left-hander. It is still relatively tricky to pass there, but now Millsy is going to be left victim, I feel, to the DRS zone coming up at the moment. And the Alpines, this is TRT Lucifer's best chance. He goes down to the inside with DRS, he'll have that covered, and TRT Lucifer has retaken the lead of this Grand Prix. Behind we have Platty fighting the McLaren. He bails out of the move though. Bails out of the move, so... And there we have it. We have NFK Vettel has followed the IIRL Twitch page. So now we are at 100 followers, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Now I have to stop the race to obviously say thank you and a well done to everyone who's following. Thank you all for following. We are at triple digits now. We could not be happier here at IIRL, particularly in the streaming team. So thank you all so much for that. Getting back to the main fight. I wonder whether John B may actually be under a little bit of pressure here. He hasn't got, but Fairley does not have overtake on, and it doesn't look like John B is going to get the move done going into that sector. This is a very close fight indeed. It's so hard to take my eyes off everything off the front. But I have to say, IIRL J, we'll go to him there, is doing very well to hold off on what is soft compound tyres. I highly suspect getting to about now, those tyres will start to go off. And now he'll probably fall back into the clutches of Mr. Wiggles. So there we see Fairley has got overtake on. And he keeps it on. He's going to go for a move, I think, potentially on John B. He's going to go for a move on his teammate. Will it be 3 abreast? Obviously, get a shot here of the two Alpines fighting each other. John B makes the move stick, but the McLaren goes round to the inside. He follows John B through, and that disrupts the Alpine 1-2. John B moves off to cover the inside. Oh, there's a little bit of contact we've just seen there, and TRT Lucifer has lost 3rd place. And now he drops down to 6th position there. That was unbelievably close there between Fairley and Lucifer. Absolutely touch and go. I may have to put that down to a racing incident if I'm entirely honest. And what has happened to IIRL J? IIRL J looks to have had a moment himself, as has Mr. Wiggles. And now it's just the top 4 that are fighting each other at the moment. So this race is turning absolutely on its head as soon as you can blink your eyes. And now the lead changes once again at the front. IIRL J loses out to Millsy, and Platty won't be long before at the back of him as well. So I highly suspect that IIRL may potentially have damage. on his car, whether that be via the floor or whatever. We can't particularly see it at the moment, but this is a golden opportunity for Fairley, and now Jamin as well. These top three separated by not much at all, and that was a bad exit there from the McLaren. IIRL J comes into the pits, and Amos Fairley has got an overtake on, goes down to the outside into the first corner, and he takes the lead from John B. I think John B was wise enough to try too hard to defence against that, especially with Jamin coming up from the rear. IIRL J fits on the medium tyres. So there we have it. That's the first, I would think, kind of scheduled stop from the soft compound tyres. And Russia's not exactly a track for eating away too much at your softs. And oh, and Clement and Price, the base has spun. And that is for sure going to bring up the safety car. Yes, it does. That's going to be a blinder for anyone. And unfortunately for IIRL J, that is going to catch him out because he pitted at what was now the wrong time indeed. So that's going to cause, I think, a bit of a dilemma maybe for the Alpines. And I think TRT Lucifer knows it because he is backing off. They are going to have to double stack potentially, the Alpines, because they are first and second going into that. You know, they're both at the front. They are second and fourth. And Mr. Wiggles has just earned himself a drive-through penalty for speeding under the safety car. So he must have gone underneath the Delta. Ross will get the safety car for sure, but everybody else is going to get a free pit stop. So John B gets the pit stop, and TRT Lucifer misses out big time here. Let's see how the pit stops go. Interesting. Fairley goes on to softs. What does John do? He goes on to the softs as well. And soft tyres for Jamin. Wiggles now into the pits. Flatty into the pits, Millsy into the pits, Sean Gregory into the pits, Greg, Jake Sharrock and Aki as well into the pits. Will Runamuck be coming along into the pits as well? Yes, he is coming into the pits. So everyone now, apart from TRT Lucifer, into the pits lane. So now, this is a bad situation for TRT Lucifer because it probably would have been worth the time to double stack the cars. But with that, TRT Lucifer is now... he is at mercy of falling all the way out of the points because he has stayed out. And you will see, just like that, the McLaren of Fairley is right behind him. So that is an utter shame for TRT Lucifer, who is now, unfortunately, I wouldn't say out of contention, but that has certainly crippled his chances of winning this Grand Prix. He was in a fight for the lead, but I think because of the way as it works out, as John B is the leader, he will get priority in the pit stops. TRT Lucifer will lose out in a big, big way. And that's the only other thing I can think of he's trying to do, is to stretch these mediums out a bit further now he goes into... yeah, as we're in the safety car period, if you can stretch these mediums out for about 4 or 5 more laps, then there should be no concerns about the soft compound tyre. So that strategy actually could work out in his favour. I believe we are just waiting now for the back markers to come across, chase the pack. But with this, I suspect there will be either the end of this lap or the next. We will have the safety car back in, and all sorts of things happening down at the front of this grid. as a go, we'll check out the penalties that everyone has. We have Jamin and Lucifer 3 seconds worth of penalties. We have a drive-through penalty for Wiggles, and Aki AMG also has a 3-second penalty himself. So even more bad news for the Alpine in the lead. So let's see if the safety car indeed decides to pull in. And the safety car is coming in at the end of this lap. But it's hard to see how Lucifer, with 12 lap-old options, can defend against all the drivers behind him who are on fresh compound tyres. With, if he could just eke out maybe a few more laps, then that should play into his pocket. But so obviously the staying out has obviously forced him to go alternate for a strategy, and he is doing his utmost to back up the pack. When's he going to drop it? Well, it's not right now. Surely it'll be as soon as he exits this corner. And it's now, and just like that, he's lost the lead. That is a bad restart, but I think with the slipstream, he should be able to get him back. He obviously knew, but the McLaren is defending so aggressively. Has he lost the position? Yes, he has. It looks like, I don't know where he left there, but it looks like a little bit of contact, and just like that, I think Jamin now may actually go into the lead. Yes, PSR Jamin has taken the lead. And John B still sort of loses out. He's still in 3rd position, and that was not the restart that Lucifer needed at all, as Fairley now passes him, and I highly suspect that John B will not be standing in the way of his teammate either. And no, and yeah, and John B is through. So Lucifer loses now and now drops down to 4th position, with Platty now up into P5. And oh, what's happened here? Lucifer has spun his Alpine, and I think for now he's got to come in for sure for tyres. So that drops him all the way into 12th position. And Mr. Wiggles, I think, has had a moment. Has he served his penalty? No, he's not served his penalty. So he must have had another moment on the track. But straight away, it's Jamin in the lead. So that is a brilliant restart, I think, for him. I think Fairley was certainly caught up between his fight with TRT Lucifer, and that's brought him into the hunting ground of his teammate FRA John B. We have Platty, who arguably is better placed on the medium tire. He doesn't have to stop again. He doesn't have to go out and attack everybody, but it depends how well everyone on the soft tyres can nurse their tyres. I mean, they won't have as much fuel in the car, and just under half the race actually to do. So if that's possible to do the soft tyres there, then that's certainly going to obviously play well, obviously, for the likes of Jamin, who obviously has got a penalty himself. And the Alpine of actually looks like Lucifer, he hasn't gone into the pits, he's stayed out. So there we have Wiggles. He thought he sort of served his penalty, but he obviously comes in now to serve said drive-through penalty, as PSR Jamin is rocketing away from John B as he needs to, because the gap between the two is just short of about the 2.2 seconds now. So the more time he builds, then that penalty is not going to have an effect on him. Sean Gregory drops down into 8th position on top, as John B stays. He's still about 7/10 now, so little but surely Jamin is building the gap that he needs. Another couple more laps like this will serve him well. He does another fastest lap in the Alfa Romeo, as we have Iros J closing up to Millsy, with Platty now has inherited 4th position, as TRT Lucifer stays out yet again on the medium tyres. With, it's hard to see what he's going to gain apart from this, apart from maybe a safety car or whatever, sorting each other out. And APS Greg passes Sean Gregory to go into 8th in the Mercedes. The Aston Martin is on hard compound tyres versus APS Greg on softs, so it's certainly going to be a winner for Greg in terms of grip, but in terms of tyre life, it's going to be a hard job to get those softs to the end in a competitive state, so it may very well come back to Sean Gregory, but I think he's probably on too conservative of a tyre, if I'm honest. As Jake Sharrock now gets involved in the party, we'll stay on board with this battle for a little bit. I think it's certainly going to be close there, as Sharrock is quite aggressive, I think, with his braking, just to make sure he obviously can get within proximity of the cars in front. And as we see up in front, the gap is closing between AMS Fairley and John B, but it's not quite working out. And look here, Sean Gregory is going to lose out to the AlphaTauri, and he does. But now Run Amok gets a 3-second time penalty for warnings there, but he's going to do a Fairley and stick around out to the outside. A little bit of contact between the Aston and the Williams, so very argy-bargy, it has to be said. But they're still finding it out going into the final sector of the corner. They seem to be doing the impossible and making Sochi actually a raceable track, it seems. As we go up to John B, and just like that has passed AMS Fairley. So he can now go and hunt John B for the lead. As things stand, if things were standing as they were at the moment, then you could say that John B could get in the lead and win this. I don't know whether Fairley has damage or not, but now, as John B has been released, arguably probably the fastest driver in this league right now, he is already chomping down the gap between himself and PSR Jamin, who has a 3-second penalty, and with things stand where he'll end up in third, and the longer he holds up probably John B, he's probably going to brill in all the other cars with him as well, so he's very cautious game needs to be played here from the leader. As they're coming down towards the rest of the pack, the two Mercedes fighting out between each other, but Platty and Ross also, I think that's probably the second closest battle there, with Platty about 3 seconds back from Fairley, but on medium tyres. It could very well be coming to those on the mediums, because who knows how long those softs are actually going to be. Oh, and PSR Jamin has had a moment. I don't know whether he's got damage. And he goes into the pits. And just like that, John B has just re-inherited the lead. And he's retired, crucially. PSR Jamin has retired. What is going on there? So now this throws the race back on its head now. So I think we'll see now if Fairley has damage here, but the two leaders, you could argue now this is really the fight for the win. It is AMS Fairley versus John B. Let's go behind, Ross J and Platty still fighting each other in the Haas and Alfa Romeo respectively. Jake Sharrock closes up to the Mercedes, but that is horrible stuff for PSRY Jamin. The gap between the leaders now stands at 0.4 of a second. But crucially, he has not opened his DRS. This doesn't look like he's opened his DRS. He probably knows he's not going to get the overtake done here. Ross J backs off as well. I'm not seeing any DRSs opening, apart from obviously the Mercedes. But that's very crucial. Like, Fairley had the opportunity to wait for the DRS, but he's not opened it. Maybe he's just waiting maybe for that first corner. Maybe he feels that's a better overtaking spot. As Run Amok now gets a time penalty for cutting the corner. And John B is very, very good off that exit. No overtake so far has been activated on that McLaren, but I think maybe he's got a DRS failure. I wonder whether AMS Fairley has got a DRS failure. Because if it were open, if he could have opened it, he would have. As from 6th, 7th and 8th, the fight closes up more and more. It's coming to Jake Sharrock, I think, who is now on the medium tyres. As Aki arguably is on the soft tyre, so may very well be the wrong tyre. Is starting to come to the AlphaTauri. Could be on for 6th position. And the fight up front is causing Millsy to get in on the action between Ross and Platty. And the gap between the leaders stays at 0.6 of a second. Fairley for sure will close up. There they go. He's got his DRS open now. So maybe, I don't know, maybe he was just trying to save energy. But it could be rather obvious that he was doing that. And it looks like Runner Muck has had a moment in the Williams and he has lost his front wing. And there we go. We've got a safety car. Safety car has been deployed. So those with a fresh set of soft tyres. Yes. Yes. John B is coming in, as is AMS Fairley. What's Platty going to do? No, he's not coming in. He's staying out. Millsy's coming in the McLaren. The Mercedes, both Mercedes come in, so they'll have to double stack. Jake Sharrett comes in. Sean Gregory comes in. TRT Lucifer is already pitted. So, well, you may not get a free pit stop, but he'll at least close up to the back of the field. What's happened here? Jake Sharrock comes into the pits. Greg, I think, is the one that's going to be losing out. Yes, because he's had to double stack behind his teammate. So Iros J and Platty are both out. They caught the safety car. And we're going to have what looks like is going to be another close shootout for the remainder of this Grand Prix. We have from 3rd down to 10th are all on fresh soft compound tyres. And Mr. Wiggles, what is he going to do in his AlphaTauri? Is he going to box? Yes, he is. He'll be putting on fresh softs as well. So that will be 8 drivers of fresh. And with only 11 people looking to finish the race, only 1 people here will not score. So as I give my throat a bit of a break. As TRT and Mr. Wiggles come up to catch the back of the field, we get the impression that the safety car could very well be ending at the end of this particular lap. But with only 6 laps to go, I think it's about time it should probably end, to be fair. It's all to play for, particularly between Fairley and John B, who are in a fight between each other for the race win. With Millsy and Aki as well, everyone is brought back into play now. The order is effectively reset. And the lottery field, that is a Formula 1 race. Well, the safety car periods mainly. Yeah, so I suspect these two won't be long before they catch up to the back of the pack. We'll have 6 laps to go. 6 laps to go if the safety car pulls in at the end of this one. So there we have it. I was right. The safety car is coming at the end of this lap because TRT Lucifer and Mr. Wiggles have caught up to the back of the pack. Now, this is crucial, especially for John B and Fairley, who are fighting for the lead. Now we have Platty and Iros J, who are on worn mediums, who elected to stay out. I don't think the gamble in here is going to pay off. It rarely does in these league races, but there's still a lot of field to do. But don't rule anything off, because anything can happen in any of these Formula 1 races. And Platty, what does he do? He drops it now, and the race gets back underway. So there we have the top four, and they all seem quite evenly spaced out. Doesn't look like any major position changes are going to be happening, because it was a much cleaner getaway than it was last time. As Platty will lead them, Iros J second, John B third, Fairley fourth, Milty fifth, Mr. Wiggles and Aki all get time penalties for cutting, I presume, that long turn one. As the drivers now, pretty much all of them from third down, are all on fresh soft tyres. Lucifer's only a lap older, but that's pretty insignificant at this point. Things are more or less starting to space out. I highly suspect it won't be long, probably the end of this lap, before we see one of these drivers through the Alpine, through the Alfa Romeo up in front, but behind the McLaren is still lurching onto the back of that Alpine. I think he's saving his overtake. John B wants to get a move on. It stays relatively status quo at the top. Oh, and John B has lost it, and Fairley has gone into the lead. Well, the net lead, rather, because he's got to pass, obviously, the Alfa Romeo and the Haas, but that is crucial for the outcome of this Grand Prix. Now, Platty and Ross can get through to the end of the race on those tyres, but the problem is they're not going to be all that competitive. As you see on board with John B, who's got the slipstream, I imagine we'll have overtake on as well. Fairley is within striking distance, but he's going to hang back this one, it seems. The positions are still stable out at the front. You get the impression that those on the medium tyres are corks in the bottles for everybody, as Jake Sharrett continues to harass the Mercedes of Aki AMG, who, once I look here, has got 6 seconds worth of penalties, so he'll drop all the way to the back. Greg gets penalties as well, and Mr. Wiggles has 12 seconds worth of penalties, amazingly. So, go back to tyres. So actually, we're near the end of the race, so we are going to go on to penalties, so we can get that view there. I think that's a bit more significant, given how we know already what field everyone is going to be on in terms of tyres. And this is going to be so close. Fairley has got to clear the Alfa Romeo, but he's got to do it in a very clean way, because John B is coming. Line astern is seen, so all the way down to 11th position. So all 11 drivers here are running pretty much nose to tail. So it's a very close finale. A mistake could cost you absolutely dearly, as the TRT Lucifer overtakes Sean Gregory but nearly loses the back end. So he is making inroads in that Alpine. But let's go back to the top of the order, as Fairley has got DRS open, but he's got to defend from John B, and Iros J is going to go for a move, it seems, on Platty. How is this going to pan out? Oh, and it's very aggressive there, and Fairley loses, I think, maybe a little bit of front, which is going to leave him exposed to John B, who has got the inside line on the long sweeping left-hander. Is he going to make the move stick? Oh, and Fairley makes it wiggle around the outside, forces John B wide, but the Alpine is ahead. Crucially, he is ahead, and Fairley drops down to 5th, and there we have it. Millsy up into 4th, John B up into 3rd, and that is crucial for AMS Fairley, who I suspect now is either rattled or just has damage. But that is a huge change in how this race is going to pan out. And now we have Iros J having to fend off from John B, who should overtake him easily with DRS. Millsy behind the other medium rule tyre runner, Platty. John B goes round to the outside and he makes the move stick. And there we have John B once again in the lead in the Alpine. Millsy has got to clear these cars quickly if he wants any chance of winning this Grand Prix, because on fresh softs, John B will be rocketing away from everybody up behind him. He's got to make those moves quickly, particularly on Platty. He's got to do it now. And see behind, we have TRT Lucifer right behind Jake Sharrock. There we have Millsy going round to the outside. What will be the outside for the first corner? Is he going to make it work on Platty? Yes, he is. He's up into third. Jake Sharrock defends from TRT Lucifer, but he goes wheel to wheel with Fairley. And along the long left-hander, he gets up into sixth, and Fairley, I think, may have damage and is running all the way down the order, which is a massive shame for him. 3 laps to go, and so much has happened already. TRT Lucifer has called his way back up into 7th, but has still got that 3-second penalty. But might bear that in mind. And with IIRL J surely about to drop out of the DRS zone, and Mr. Wiggles has retired from the session, so it looks like he may have crashed out of that particular section. Millsy is 7/10 behind the Alfa Romeo, but he's got to be daring here if he wants any chance to win this Grand Prix, because the Alpine for sure is getting away. And no, he doesn't do the move. What can Millsy do to salvage his race? Looks very much like John B is going to win this one, because he's already got over a 2-second gap. Almost a 2-second gap, rather, as Jake Sharrock moves up now into 5th position. He's got past Aki AMG, and Lucifer won't be long behind him. But this is crucial, because Millsy has now got to pass IIRL J, which I expect he will do now, and yes, he does, but I highly suspect the damage is done. That should get John B the buffer that he needs to win this Grand Prix. It's 1.7 seconds the gap, so unless Millsy can put forward some gargantuan time, then I highly suspect that this win, that the race is going to go to John B. But TRT Lucifer is not going to benefit himself though. He may very well find himself dropping down to 9th or 8th with all penalties applied. So it's not the best result for him either, considering he was fighting for 2nd position at one point, and he ended up is currently down in 7th place. We're going to go on board with Jake Sharrock as the DRS train starts. Millsy 1.8 behind John B, so I highly suspect the race will be done and adjusted unless there's a last minute mistake from John B, which I think is fairly unlikely. IIRL J still within a second. Oh, and what's happened here? That's TRT Lucifer. Lucifer has spun. And crucially, has he lost his front wing? Yes, he has. And that is a massive shame for the Alpine driver, who was looking so good for going so good for a podium earlier. Now it's not even gonna. He's only gonna score 1 point. And there we have Lucifer is out of this session, so no points will be scored for TRT Lucifer. And there we have Jake Sharrock. Is he going to attempt to move around the outside of the Haas? There's still plenty to play for, and it is so close. It's still 2-10-2, so much fight going on here. You can't help but feel the race may be secured up front, but all the drama is happening from about 3rd place down, because anyone is still within DRS zone range is going to be under attack. Fairly, I have to say, is fairly unlucky there. The pun was not intended, I promise you. As we'll see here, can Platty hold onto 4th position from Jake Sharrock? We're going to go on board with the AlphaTauri and see what he does. This is his last chance to make hay here. His 4th position is up for grabs here, and no, he's not going to do it. He's going to hold on. It's been such a brilliant ending to this Russian Grand Prix. and somehow they've done the impossible and made the Sochi race exciting. Might have been a little bit of contact there between the two, but we are going to go back on board with the race leader, who has put in yet another sterling performance. FRA John B comes across the line yet again, spins across the line to win the Russian Grand Prix. And oh, look at that, Platty crashes across him there as he comes across the line, and close by as well. Oh, and another McLaren crashes him as well. Certainly a humorous ending to this Grand Prix, no doubt. But there we have it, folks. John B yet again takes the win. Truly a beautiful drive once again from FRA John B. It's almost like watching Sebastian Buemi dominate when he went to Formula E. And speaking of Formula E, guys, I don't know if you've seen, but Dan Ticktum has announced a deal to drive with NEO, the Formula E team. So hopefully we'll see a rejuvenation of his career there. So there we have it, folks. That is the end. That is the end result of the Russian Grand Prix. We have FRA John B as the winner, Millsy second in the McLaren. We have Iros J third, brilliant drive from him in the Alfa Romeo. Platty is fourth in the Haas. Jake Sharrock is fifth in the Alfa Tauri. Sean Gregory is sixth in the Aston Martin. Seventh is Amos Fairley in the McLaren. Unfortunately for him, it was just bad. I think unfortunately he just lost out after the contact there in the first corner. The Mercedes pair come across 8th and 9th, and Mr. Wiggles, despite crashing out, is in 10th. And TRT Lucifer unfortunately was disqualified, and the rest of the drivers here unfortunately crashed out, so commiserations to them. But there we have it, folks. That is the end of this particular stream for the 81, the assist tier 1 of the IIRL Racing League. We've just finished round 12. Thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you once again, everybody, for helping us get up to over 100 followers on our Twitch channel. It's very much appreciated, and we really look forward to having you back on the next stream. Tune in on Sunday with, I believe it's TD hosting the stream for the Russian Grand Prix for 82. So hopefully I'll be racing this time, and second, I'll be trying not to spin. I'll see you guys then. Thank you so much for watching. Have a nice night.